days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Yeah, I was feeling that one, Alex. And today has been an absolute exciting day. We had a lot of announcements to be made.
Yeah, I was going to say something happened or something.
Yeah, we got out there about the draft party. That's what's going to happen. Round two of the draft, we're going to be going live. We're going to have a live stream out at Back Alley Brewery in Galt, California.
That's right.
Already, the outpouring of people coming is fantastic. I'm looking forward to it.
It's crazy.
But yeah, today's been a great day, and we get to continue that because we're going to be talking about interior offensive line, which for most 49er fans, they believe is a real need.
Super need.
Kyle Shanahan had some comments about that Aaron Banks, the reason they drafted him in the second round is in case Laken Tomlinson left, so that should get everyone's eyebrows raised. But we got some other guys to talk about as well, because there's some good talent in this draft that can play interior offensive line for the 49ers.
Lots. There's a lot of talented guys and a lot of guys we want to talk about. And look, there's guys that we like that maybe necessarily aren't going to fit in the scheme, so we're going to try and not talk about those guys as much as possible and focus in on the guys that make the most sense and potentially the guys that are versatile and can do a whole bunch of different things and play a lot of different positions because as we've seen from the San Francisco 49ers, they tend to draft those type of players. They really do like those kind of players, and there's a couple of names to keep an eye on in this draft, and we hope you're excited, Cutback Crew. I know I'm excited, and it's been a fun-filled day, and now it's about to get even more funner. Is that even a word? I don't even know if funner is a word, but at this point, I don't care, Ant, because I'm excited. I'm excited to talk with the Cutback Crew. I'm excited to talk about interior offensive linemen. Let's do this thing.
Oh, yeah, and Bomber says, hey, Ant, Alex, I'll see you guys at the draft party. I'm down the street in Wilton. Yeah, we know Wilton pretty well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so the beer shall flow. I love it, Bomber.
Bomber is like close.
He's
so
close.
There you go. That's going to be a lot of fun. Baymax, the biggest need could be for sure. And Alex, this is going to be fun. So we're going to change up the format a little with everyone in the TCC. We're going to talk about a player. Then you guys are going to let us know what you think, ask questions, and we'll get into them. And that's how we'll break it down for this episode.
That's what we're going to do, Ant. And let's start, right? Let's start with the actual gentleman.
And Ernest is asking, Galt is a suburb of Sacramento, right? Yes.
Pretty close. It's like what, about 15,
it's just on the other
minutes?
side of Elk Grove from Sacramento. So yeah. If you're coming from Sacramento, at most, it will take you 30 minutes, at most.
And that's if there's heavy amounts of traffic.
Yeah, you should be able to get there at a pretty decent time. So
absolutely. So Ant, let's start with guys that would be considered more guard prospects. As much as I love Zion Johnson at Boston College, let's not start there, just because I don't think there's any way he's getting to the San Francisco 49ers at 61. Feels like he's going in the first round in most mock drafts. Kenyon Green at Texas A&M, same sort of thing there, similar sort of thing. So let's start with the prospect out of UCLA. Sean, is it Rhyan? Is that how it's pronounced?
I'm just going to say Ryan.
Or Rhyan?
I don't know for sure.
I'm not sure either.
The one thing I do know is that the dude looked like a beast on film. I was excited about his potential and what he could do. Played predominantly tackle in college, but he's somebody I could see moving inside, and that's why he's on this interior offensive line list. Sometimes the 49ers will value a guy that plays tackle and then kick them inside. He would be a high-level guy. He's got heavy hands. He plays pretty low. He's able to move people off their spot against their will. Those were things that I like. So that means he can fit in the run game, and you're looking for run scheme fits. And I think that this guy does fit the scheme. He's got athleticism. He could play in the 49ers gap scheme as well. He can pull and get on the move, and playing in that style of offense for Chip Kelly, he can handle what the 49ers are going to be doing. So I liked him as a scheme fit. I liked his ability overall. I liked his hands, and I think he would be a nice addition, especially if you're sliding him in and having him play guard.
Correct, because he doesn't necessarily fit the length that you're looking for in tackle prospects and things like that. Now, he's 6'5", he's big, but the wingspan isn't the biggest thing in the world for this gentleman. But what I do like is the lateral quickness, and you mentioned that a little bit, and this guy does move laterally pretty well. He is athletic.
Yeah.
He can get around in space. And he's pretty solid as a run blocking option already. Things that I've seen from him, like you talked about him being able to move guys. He does that. He does that very, very well. I'm excited about the possibilities of if this guy does actually, in fact, move into the interior. And most places are mocking him that way. So you have to imagine that he's thinking about it and at least prepping and planning for this thing. And that's not a bad thing there, a bad scenario. A guy who doesn't necessarily fit the bill in terms of maybe being an ideal prototypical tackle playing guard. But here's the thing for the 49ers. If that's your plan, then you also know in a pinch you have a guy that has played on the outside and knows the techniques and the things that needs to be done in order to play left tackle at a high level, or right tackle at a high level.
Yeah, this is one of those things you saw with Colton McKivitz, right?
Correct.
When the 49ers went after Colton McKivitz, it was a guy that had tackle experience, but they knew they could bounce inside. This is something they do consistently. They draft guys with this sort of makeup and they move them inside. That's why Aaron Banks was a little bit of an outlier from what they normally do. They drafted a guy that was position specific on the offensive line. So we'll see. We'll see if this is a way that they roll. But if this guy was available, and I've seen some questions coming out, when do we think the 49ers go offensive line? It depends on if one of these great players are fall to the 49ers at 61. I think they would have to consider going interior offensive line, even though from Kyle Shanahan's current comments about Aaron Banks and the fact that Daniel Brunskill has been tendered a deal, you would think that would be kind of where they're rolling with the 49ers interior starting offensive line.
They're looking for competition.
Right, some competition possibly. And there are players that we're going to talk about that are not only competition, that are maybe centers that could play guard or tackles that can move into play guard. So I think we're going to have a nice list to go through. But I'm curious what the TCC thinks, about Sean Rhyan.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, there's that at the end of the day. I'm going to Sean Rhyan is one of those ones that I watched some film on, Ant, but wasn't sure if he'd be there, wasn't sure if he'd be available. So I want to hear from the Cutback crew what they feel about Sean Rhyan. So make sure you're leaving that in the chat right now before we move on to the next gentleman and talk about the next person there in space. But I think Sean Rhyan, however you want to pronounce it. I apologize, sir, for butchering the name repeatedly on stream. My bad. I like a lot of the things that you see out of him, and I do think, while this isn't necessarily like a guy that is going to come in immediately and be a bona fide, for sure he's going to start, I think he raises the level of competition in the room. I think it lights a fire underneath a guy like Daniel Brunskill, and at least puts us in a position where Daniel Brunskill could be the sixth offensive lineman, which I think is something the Niners need to seriously be considering, trying to upgrade the position to make sure that is the case.
Oh, I think they'd love that.
I think that's the ideal situation. Now, there's no guarantee a guy like this comes in and solidifies it, but it does make it more plausible now that you're going to have an actual battle in training camp.
Yeah, I think so. Zack Tom says, I believe in Aaron Banks, out of no problem getting some more O-line. Yeah, exactly. You want to continue to build. And one of the ways they could actually build this is instead of going just with an offensive tackle or offensive guard, they could actually go with someone like Alec Lindstrom, who plays center at Boston College. He could maybe come in and play guard, be an understudy as well to Alex Mack, learn the tricks of the trade, and then be able to transition into playing starting center when Alex Mack decides to retire.
Correct.
So he's a potential player as well that the 49ers might target. There's another guy we're going to talk about later out of Arizona State that could potentially do the same sort of thing. So, Alex, is Alec Lindstrom somebody that you really liked? Before I get into it, I want to hear what you had to say about it.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. He's a scheme fit. Talk about a guy who's a legitimate scheme fit guy. This is what he did over at BC, and he played at a very high level and started 3 years, I believe, there at the center spot. And this is a guy who anchored down their offensive line for the past few seasons. An offensive line, Ant, which strength was, in a surprising twist of event, the run game, not the quarterback play and the receiving aspect, but the run game.
Yeah.
There is one thing I'm a little worried about with Lindstrom, and that's at times it feels like and seems like he plays a little bit high. But at the end of the day, that might have to do something with the 6'3" frame at the center position. I'm just going to put that out there. Being 6'3" as a center, it might be a reason for it. But I do love hand placement. He's also pretty strong, too. I mean, his snap and single arm punch off that snap is fantastic. I like a lot of the things he does. I think he has a lot of high upside. And this is a thing, too, with him. It's developmental. So you can bring him in, have him kind of sit behind Alex Mack as well, learn the tricks of the trade. He's already a highly intelligent guy. This is a guy who understands schemes already and made a lot of calls at BC. So he's going to be able to pick up the system, pick up the terminology. And if Alex Mack decides after this next season, hey, see you later, I'm out of here, Lindstrom can slide right in with a year under his belt, learning from a Pro Bowl caliber player and a guy who has been one of the better centers in the league in Alex Mack.
Yeah, and he was asked at the combine. In fact, it was by it was either Jordan Elliott or
I think it was
Jason Aponte.
I think it was Elliott.
One of them asked him, about his interaction with the 49ers, and he said he would love to play for San Francisco, that it fits his skill set and this scheme really fits what he wants to do, and he's not wrong. He would fit very nice in San Francisco's system. And I believe Kyle Shanahan likes to have veteran players that play the position for him. So getting someone in early before Alex Mack was to retire means you could develop this guy and, possibly get a center that could be a linchpin in your offense for a long time. So this is a great move for them. And you're right. He does play at times a little high, but I have less concerns about that because I believe that Chris Forster could get him lower. I think he can play at a lower level, but I liked some of the grit and some of the aggression, the way he was able to get off blocks and get to the second level. But yeah, this is a guy I would definitely be interested for the 49ers. And pick 61 is not out of the question. He could possibly fall to 61. And I think if he was sitting there, the 49ers would definitely be tempted, depending on what receivers and what edge rushers are there. But I think this is the first time you could be like, oh, and maybe this player is like, oh, 49ers might want to think about getting that guy.
Agreed. And listen, he's a zone blocking guy who showed ability to get up to second level and does a great job with hip mobility as well, getting around and kind of sealing off and shielding off lanes for running backs. The scheme is, it's almost too good to be true. And he's sitting there as usually in the top 100 for prospects, which means if you're the 49ers, if you're sitting there at 61, you're getting a guy who's going to be, one of the better guys that you can get and more pro ready players that you can potentially draft that you have less questions about. Lindstrom makes sense. If the Niners feel like making sure they have a guy who can solidify the O-line going forward after this year and they're worried about potential options in next year's draft, you can just write off all worries drafting a guy like this who is going to sit and develop, fits the scheme already, intelligent, wants to be in San Francisco. All those things are pluses, Ant.
Yeah, definitely. We have an absolutely great question from Android user. Is a hand placement more of a pass pro skill? No, hand placement is important for both run game and pass game. You need to get your hands inside on that, chest plate of the defensive lineman. You want to get into this interior region here where you can gain control. It's all about getting there first. Defensive linemen are trained to protect their chest plate, and offensive linemen are taught to protect their chest plate first as well. The first person that gets there is usually going to be the one that is able to handle business. Now, over time, leverage has kind of changed, the way that people thought about leverage. You see it all the time with Trent Williams grabbing a player, that goes too low and throwing them down to the ground with different moves. But I do believe that hand placement is very important in the run game. It's going to help you get established control of that defensive player, able to maneuver that player around as you turn your hips and get this guy moving. So hand placement, the winner to the chest plate, is usually the one that wins the overall block. And that's why you see these guys with heavy hands that are thunderous and throwing their punches are the ones that usually get the ball moving. That initial impact is so important, and it's not just about the hands, but about the hips. As they thrust forward, you put your hands into them, and that's when you get the movement. If you can get a defender on his heels a little bit, you win.
Yeah, you do. Hand placement is the key. Getting your hands in the right spot prevents the defense as well from getting and establishing control and moving you how they want to move you and being able to twist and turn and pull you the way they want you to be pulled. And a guy like Lindstrom has also shown not just good hand placement but good balance as well. Meaning when he doesn't necessarily get his hands in the right spot or doesn't get that first fire off punch and hit and control, guys don't overpower him all of the time. Now when he gets high, yes, but the getting high issue is not a every snap issue. It's an occasional issue, and it's typically for him in run blocking situations. It's not in pass pro when I was watching film. So this is not an issue with this guy. Like, you worried about him getting too high and getting moved around in space and getting driven back. He anchors down pretty well. I'm very excited about the possibility of an Alec Lindstrom, and I hope the cutback crew is too. And there was a couple other ones here too. I saw Zack Tom said, yes, if we get a center now, then we can watch and he can watch and studies how Mac runs the position close up and be a solid starter when the time comes. It seems like the Niners did that with their first round and second round guys last year, right? Trey Lance, you drafted him to sit a year behind a guy who runs your system and executes well. Aaron Banks, sit a year behind a guy who runs and operates your system well, and tested him at right guard just to see. And now that he's, it didn't work out that last season. Yeah. Brunskill ended up being your guy. Now that Lincoln's moved on, he can slide him back into his natural position at left guard. And guess what? He still has an understanding of the system developed, and you feel confident about where he could be going forward. And that's I don't know about you, Ant, but I view that as a positive. I don't view that as a negative per se.
Oh, no. It's always a positive when you have the opportunity to step in, and learn from a player that already understands, because he's going to teach you the ins and outs of the position. You're not learning on the fly. That is always good for development, but it's not always the case. Sometimes you have to have guys that step in because they're their best option, and they gave it a run with Aaron Banks last year to see if he would be a better option than Daniel Brunskill, and he wasn't ready and up for the task. Similar situation with Trey Lance. He just wasn't ready yet. But they're going to turn to these young guys and expect them to step up, and I think they're going to do it. But along the way, you have to continue to build this offensive line because, you can be happy with who's there. But anytime you have an opportunity to add a player to your roster that could potentially be better than even the depth players, you have to go do it. So I think that's why offensive line and interior offensive line needs to be a position that 49ers focus on. I think they will. I think they'll address it at some point, and that's why a lot of these guys are great options. Just Lindstrom is a really good option, potentially in that 61 area. I know he's not as sexy as, Christian Watson or even, Boy Mafia or one of these edge rushers that would be available, but it could be just what the doctor ordered.
It's true. And Baymack wants to know who would be the better offensive lineman between the two of us. Seeing as I didn't play O-line, it's going to go to Ant, but Ant can attest. I was a very well-versed individual at wide receiver who stepped in screen games and ran screen game stuff with the O-line at times. So I know my stuff on the O-line, but if you're asking who's the better O-lineman, it's not even a contest.
No, and especially because I went to a ton of clinics throughout my days.
Yes.
Not only as a player, but then eventually as a coach as well. Offensive line was my forte, so I do understand offensive line play pretty well. And I've met a lot of great coaches along the way. A lot of really good ones. So, there's offensive line. I think I would be a little bit better than Alex at offensive line, just a little bit.
I'm going to give you more than a little bit. You're being humble right now. I appreciate it.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to say a lot more than a little bit.
You'd be a lot better than me at receiver, that's for sure.
Fair. There's that. Not as well as back in my actual playing days, but yeah. I'll give myself a little bit of leeway there. And Jagged asked too, now that Arden Key signed with the Jags, is it more important to get edge at 61 or maybe safety? I don't know. I really don't know. But I think if the right guy is there at 61, it could be this. It could be interior O-line, and you have to consider that. We have to look at all those options. And I just saw someone, Ken Martin just said, Donovan West, center from Arizona State. So why don't we just go there?
Yeah,
because this is a guy that we both really, really like. This is a guy we enjoy. This is a guy that is flexible, can play guard, can play center. He's versatile. And we know the San Francisco 49ers love themselves some versatile offensive linemen who can do a handful of different things. This guy does that on top of the fact that in the screen game, he's fantastic. Run game, he's fantastic. Pass pro sets anchors down pretty well. I think pass pro, would you agree that pass pro, or what do you think about his pass pro? Do you think that's the biggest part of his game that he needs to work on?
Yeah. I think so. I think he's a really good run blocker that needs to develop in the pass game. So he makes perfect sense for the 49ers. That's like literally what they draft.
What?
Guys who are really good in the run game that need to develop in the pass, and then they expect Chris Forster to develop them. But I do like Donovan West. And actually the one that kind of turned me on to watching any of his film was Bradley Graham of the SF Niners. He was all over this. I'm going to give him complete credit. And then when I watched the film, I was like, okay, yeah, I like this guy. I do like the grit. I like how he gets after it. I think he plays a little bit higher than Lindstrom. I think Lindstrom overall is a better talent. But I like the things that West does. But really what I like is where you could possibly draft him. So you're going to have 1 year for him to develop, potentially, under Alex Mack. You could draft this guy in the 4th or 5th round, potentially, and then institute him in. And that's where the 49ers like to draft their interior offensive linemen, Q, Colton McKivitz, and other players. So you could put him in there, and he could handle it. Now, he can handle his own scheme. He fits the scheme of what the 49ers want to do. He's pretty good at getting to the second level. He's able to, do help blocking in pass game. So I think that there's some positives there. I think his hands could get a little bit better. Sometimes his placement's a little off. And I think at times he seems to be a little unbalanced. When he's in movement, he can get moved off his spot and unbalanced. Those are things that can be worked on, and that's why he's not a first-round talent. He's a 4th or 5th round talent because he's got areas where he can improve. But in the Kyle Shanahan system, they can definitely mask some of those things. So being a good run blocker will put him out there and make him a possibility for the 49ers in the 4th or 5th.
I like that a lot. It's a good spot for him there. I've seen him go as low as the 6. I've seen him go as high as the 3. You find the middle between there, and it's right there in the 4th and the 5th. What happened?
Bruce Arians is retiring?
Holy crap, Megan, is that for real?
Yeah,
Wow, breaking while we're on the show. Bruce Arians retiring. What does that mean for the Bucs and Brady?
Hello, Sean Payton. Welcome to Tampa Bay.
I wonder, dude. I wonder. Oh, my God. Can you imagine?
Now we know why Tom Brady's back.
Tom
Brady won.
Wow.
There you go. Well, anyways.
He lost to Bill Belichick, but he beat Bruce Arians.
Yeah, we'll get back on the offensive line.
Let's get back to the O-line. That's just crazy breaking news, my guy. Holy cow. But as for Donovan West, getting back to that gentleman, I just like a lot of the stuff that he does. He does anchor down pretty well. He's got some functional strength. He's a 6'4" guy. He's 6'4". He's 300 pounds. I'm excited about what he could potentially bring to the table and what he can do. It'll be interesting to see where he falls and where he goes, but I think that 4th, 5th round is a safe place for him. And Ken Martin, thank you so much for for bringing that up, because now we got to talk about a guy that we both really, really enjoy, Ant.
Yeah, we do. There's a couple guys from Arizona State, that are really good, and Donovan West is one of those guys. So I was very excited to talk about him because he's one of those guys that definitely stands out as potential for the 49ers, and I think he's going to be available at some of the spots in which they pick. So anywhere in that 4th to 5th round range, and especially the 172, I'd be interested in that.
True, and Mark Graves just asked, do they draft the best football player regardless of position at 61? They might. They very well could. And
I think, minus a couple of positions. I don't think they're going to draft the quarterback, for instance, at 61.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, you have enough areas of where you can improve or at least improve depth that you take the best available player. And that's really how you help your depth. You don't draft need. And they've been going through and trying to fill need, just like on defensive line. They don't really have a need per se. Just they have, they can add. They can add additional players. So it's like with linebacker, there's no real need. Safety, maybe, possibly, but I think other than that, they're pretty much doing a good job. Nickel corner still a need, I think.
Still, I would agree with you there. I would agree with you. Nickel corner still a need. Let's talk about a guy that we both really like, and actually, Ant, if I'm not mistaken, you have written down next to Dylan Parham, Love. Correct?
Yes, I do.
I'm not mistaken by Love, correct? So let the Cutback crew know what.
It's all caps too.
Okay, so it's all capital. So it's not just like kind of love. This is actual genuine love right here. Unconditional love potentially from Ant on Dylan Parham out of Memphis. What? What is it about him? Because I love him too, but what is it about him specifically for you that you like him so much?
I love his aggressive style. I mean, he gets after it. His first step is fantastic. He gets off the ball, especially in the run game. And then when he gets his hands on you, he wins more times than he loses. He gets it done. And I think that he moves people against their will. I like that aggressiveness. I like how low he plays. To me, he's one of those guys that consistently plays low. Where Donovan West played high and a little tall and can get off balance, that's not something that happens from Parham. He gets after it. So I really, really like him a lot. And I think that he would fit nice as a guard in the 49er system. I think he'd come in day one and compete with some of these guys.
Agreed.
I think that these guys, would have the work cut out to beat him out because I think he's that good of a player. Why he's not valued as much as some of the other guys, I'm not sure yet, because he would be one of those guys that I would put a 3rd-round grade on. And I think he's going to go even lower than that, which makes him potentially a nice target for the 49ers. But yeah, I like him. I think he can improve a little bit in the pass game. I think that is his weakness. But in the run game area, there you go. And so really good at run, a little bit weaker in the pass. Sounds very 49ers.
Sounds extremely 49ers. And this was a guy who was a linebacker and a tight end in high school. Ooh. So this guy was an athlete.
Jag just came through with one. We'll be getting to that.
We'll get to him. We're going to get to Goedeke. Yeah. We're going to get to Goedeke. I promise. Promise we'll get to Goedeke. But this is a guy who played linebacker, tight end in high school, in Dylan Parham. And this is a guy who's he is an athlete. He is just an athlete who has familiarity with blocking and block shedding techniques. So he understands hand placement, where he needs to be. And it shows. It shows on his film. And you talked about the low pad level, man. He plays with such great leverage. He really does. I like a lot of the things that he does. Yes, pass pro is the area he needs to work on. I get it, 49ers fans. We got to be able to protect Trey Lance when he's passing. But the Niners want to be able to run the football. And when you got a guy who plays with this kind of motor, this kind of nasty streak, who blocks the way that he blocks, goes hard and gets off the ball the way that this guy does, it just makes sense. And you're right. People don't value him. I've seen him as low as 6, and I've seen a couple of sites that have ranked him as high as second round talent. And people are hot or cold on this man. There is no in between. And if you're the 49ers and he lands in the in between, you are licking your chops at the potentials here, because you could be getting a guy who could come in and start year one if everything goes exactly the way you want it to go.
Right, I think that's crazy. Like I'm higher on him than I was on Aaron Banks last year, and Banks could potentially be the starter, but that's the kind of talent that he is. And yeah, I'm definitely excited about the potential of adding this guy to the roster. And I think a lot of NFL teams, though, are going to be hot and heavy on him. So maybe his value is going to move up as we get closer to the draft. We'll see, but he's definitely someone I'm excited about.
Jaylee just said, thinking he's climbing into the second. So he is seeing a lot of people that are starting to value him a little bit more. People are starting to realize who he is. I'm just hoping not enough people realize who he is.
I would be willing. I like him so much, I'd be willing to take him at 61.
I would take him at 61.
I want him at 93, but I'll take him at 61.
True. And Andrew Ducci just asked, would O-line at 61 be someone who would start over Banks and McKivitz more? Shouldn't have those three developed more and presumably be able to start in 2022?
Yeah, I think so. I think every one of those guys are going to develop, but you don't know what the development is of some of these players and how they fit in the scheme. And sometimes they can come in there and just supplant someone. Colton McKivitz was thought to potentially be a starter this last year.
True.
They figured 1 year of development. He wasn't even on the active roster to start the season. He started on the practice squad. You can get past in an instant And that's why you continually try to upgrade your football team. So I think he would come in and compete right away. And I think Banks has the inside shot on being the left guard. But the right guard spot is going to be Daniel Brunskill in a competition. Because ultimately, if somebody beats out Daniel Brunskill, that's the best thing for the 49ers. That means he's the swing tackle. And he's actually a swing everything because he can play every position. And that's when your team is really good.
Absolutely. And Daniel Harley just said he's going to be at the draft party.
Ooh, yeah.
So that's going to be exciting. We're going to get some non-49ers fans coming to the 49ers Cutback draft party. I love it. I absolutely love that, Ant. I'm excited about that. My question from Donald Johnson is, how many centers drafted in the later rounds have been beasts? Because I'm thinking it might be more important to go center. Might not be more important to go center that early than to go D end. This is not a deep center draft in terms of like actual guys who are legit, label of center. There's more guys who are hybrid guys who are going to be better fits who are going to go earlier. So the Niners could go after a guy who's specifically a center, or they could go after one of these guys who could fill in a bunch of different roles, third, fourth round, somewhere in there, or even fifth round potentially.
Yeah, I mean, last year there was some really good centers. I mean, really, really good centers available where the 49ers were going to pick at 43, and they traded back and then didn't get any of them, and it landed on Aaron Banks. So I think that sometimes I do question whether Kyle Shanahan wants to go center with a draft pick, or if he wants to go with a veteran player. If he wants to continue the veteran role, they'll just look to sign somebody in free agency after Alex Mack retires, and they will go with a different position. And so far, the brand for the 49ers has been draft offensive tackle and guys that can play inside or outside, and that's what they've been doing. So they may continue that. I think Aaron Banks was the first time that they really showed that they're willing to do something else other than draft a tackle and move him inside.
Yeah, it does feel like that, and it really does. Let's go on and move on to another gentleman, that we like a lot, familiar with, out of Chattanooga, Mr. Cole Strange, a guy who, again, versatile product, and versatile gentleman who can play a lot of potentially different roles in the offense. Daniel Harley just said Treader is still out there. You're not wrong, but the Niners don't have the cap space, which means you may have to be going after draft guys and potentials. And this is one that's a very intriguing one. A little bit more of, I'm not going to say hot or cold prospect, because I don't think people are hot or cold on him. I think people either love him or they hate him. And part of it has been what feels like in pass pro sets at times inconsistencies. But you know what you don't have to worry about with this guy? It's run blocking again. And this guy is absolutely phenomenal. And the scary part is there are times in pass pro sets where he just absolutely dominates. So the potential is there for this guy to be not just a good starting football player, a good starting guard or offensive lineman in this league, but to be a potential star.
Yeah, he's like up and down. I mean, there's like great plays, and then there's a couple there you're like, wow, he can't anchor. I like his athletic ability. That's why I think he fits the scheme, because he's really able to move. He's one of those guys that moves quickly. He'll be able to pull. So you don't have to worry about him running your zone scheme or running, the gap plays as well. He's able to handle all that. He has pretty good hand placement. He's able to anchor down at times, but if he loses the initial contact, he will not be able to anchor down and stop an interior defensive lineman right now. I think that's something he's going to continue to have to work on, but I do like him. And I think the area that he's going to go, he's a solid NFL prospect. So I think anywhere in that fourth round range, I think is a nice target for Cole Strange. And if he did land there, I think the 49ers would be interested in the 130 area. Picking him up and adding him to the competition on the inside is a good move for the Niners.
That's not a bad move. It's not a bad move. How does the Cutback crew feel about Cole Strange? I saw a couple people talking about I like Strange from Ken Martin. Mm-hmm. A couple people very excited about that. I hope you are. I really hope that you're excited about a guy like Cole Strange, because the versatility that he has, the strengths that he already possesses for this team, it's just going to add and breed competition in this room, which, we talked about. We didn't know if there were going to be any more signings because they've drafted a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys coming back from injuries. You're hoping to see more development out of Colton McKivitz. So it felt like drafting was the route. And, some people go, okay, well, that means then, right, if drafting is the route, that means the Niners are going to draft late for guys who need to develop. Well, maybe. Or maybe the Niners are sitting there going, some of these guys haven't developed. It's time to figure out if they need to be here long term, or if there's someone better out there for this team, and they go a little bit earlier. Maybe they go second, maybe they go third, maybe they go fourth, and go, you know what? We're going to make sure we shore this bad boy up right now. Some of you that are known by the fan base and some people really like and enjoy, you may not be here because we're ramping up the level of competition.
Yeah, and since Kyle Shanahan came out and said that they drafted, just in case somebody like Laken Tomlinson left, you got to think they could potentially be doing the same thing, right? They're going to have Mike Mcglinchey as well in his fifth-year option. Daniel Brunskill was a restricted free agent now, and in fact, he hasn't signed his offer sheet yet. but both those guys could potentially be gone as unrestricted free agents next year. So you would need to have eventual replacements. Jalen Moore could easily be the right tackle in that position, but then you would also need a right guard. So they are going to have to address this. They can address it this year and have that player develop and feel more confident with that guy already understanding Kyle Shanahan's scheme, or they could try to go with a low-budget free agent next year. I think that's why interior offensive lineman has been one of the topics that we want to talk about in positions, because it feels like this is a year where the 49ers could take that chance and draft one of these guys that could potentially slide in there and take over for Daniel Brunskill or or in Jalen Moore's place if he kicks out the tackle, if he ends up being the starter. Because I do think they need to improve the depth, on this team. Because even though I like Colton McKivitz at tackle at times, I do struggle with him playing interior at the guard spot. For some reason, it just hasn't translated so far.
No, it hasn't yet. It hasn't quite yet at this moment, Ant. Let's move on to a couple of other names, and let's go after another guy who is kind of a versatile dude who's played a lot of different roles and a lot of different hats, and mostly played tackle, played some guard as well, Ant, but has now been taking snaps at center and showing teams that I'm also a center option and center prospect. That's Zack Tom out of Wake Forest. The versatility this guy has is, it's darn near close to Zion Johnson levels of versatility in terms of where you can play him and where you can plug and put him on the offensive line. He's starting to grow on me the more film that I watch. I definitely don't see him as a tackle prospect in the league. It's definitely more of center or guard is one of the two spots that he'll be. But he's going late. He's going later for some people. I know he started to move up in some cases on mock draft boards. What do you think about Zack Tom, and do you think this makes sense?
Yeah, I like Zack Tom. He was one of those guys that when we talked about in our pre-show meeting that you lit up about. You could tell that you were really excited about Tom. And I like him as well. I think he would be a dynamite fit, and I like the versatility, that he would be able to afford the 49ers offensive line and Kyle Shanahan. And yeah, you're right. You could develop him into a center or a guard or even a potential right tackle at some point. So I think this guy makes a lot of sense for them. And one thing we know the 49ers value is versatility. There are areas of his game that he needs to improve, of course. But with all guys there are. And that's part of the reason that he's maybe not made for tackle in the NFL, but could potentially kick inside, and just be better in that role. So I look at him as a potential opportunity for the 49ers. He could fit in what they want to do. So yeah, I like him for sure for the 49ers as a potential draft pick.
He's patient. He's very patient as a blocker and technical. He's not someone who comes out and like wows you in terms of the physical strength and him like bullying guys and moving guys off, but he just doesn't get beat. He puts guys in the right spot. He gets guys around in space. Very patient, very technical with how he approaches the game, and you don't have to worry about hand placement with this guy and base and things like that. It's fundamentally he's sound. He's a sound player. But that's why he's a developing guy, because you don't know if the power is there. You don't know if the control is there, if he's going to be moving guys off of spots and, dominating at the point of attack, which are all areas you want to do if you're the San Francisco 49ers and getting out in space and making sure you're making those blocks and having an impact. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see where he lands, if it ends up being San Francisco, and where he ends up actually playing, because the guy who could play in a multitude of different spots.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Let's see what some of the cutback crew is saying. I don't know if anyone's talking about Tom or not. I see Robert just asked, what position do you guys think we pick first? It's an interesting question.
I go impact player. I mean, that's usually my thought process. So I want an impact wide receiver or an impact edge rusher, somebody that can impact the quarterback either positively for you or negatively for the opposing team as far as an edge rusher. I think if one of those edge rushers, the 49ers really covet is there and available at that spot, there are a few names that if they fall, I would even be willing to take a job at 61 if he was available. Boy Mafi, AK from Penn State. I think those guys are all there. There's some other guys as well that are going to be available, but those ones I really value at 61. And if they're there, I'd be tempted. The question will be, what would the 49ers do if it was Christian Watson still sitting there at 61, or one of these guys like AK or Boy Mafi? I wonder what the 49ers would do. I think most 49ers fans realize that edge rusher and wide receiver are places the 49ers could go. And I think offensive line might wait until 93 or 105, potentially even in the 130s when they draft there in the 4th round. But we'll see, because I do think that you want to get an impact player higher in the draft. And offensive line isn't always the sexiest or the most impactful, especially if you believe your young players are going to step up this year and you're drafting someone to eventually take over.
Very true. Caesar just asked about Abraham Lucas. That's the second time he's asked about that.
Okay.
I think he's more of a tackle prospect than a guard or center prospect. So this won't be a guy that we cover right now in this episode or even talk about right now because he's listed as a tackle. He played mostly tackle. He's projected out as a tackle. So we can talk about him later, but not a bad prospect there. Ken Martin, edge or cornerback from the guys, looking at Kingsley in the first, second, Jones going first or second. Daly just said Tom in the fourth or fifth.
Oh, I like that.
I love that.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I didn't mention cornerback. If you need a nickel corner, then 61 might be a spot for the 49ers to select a cornerback. I'm hoping they're going to have that thing fixed so they don't have to go for a cornerback at 61. I worry they're not going to be able to get a guy that can start. And I'm still concerned about Deommodore Lenoir starting as well. Even though I think Lenoir will be improved from last year, I still have questions about him in man-to-man coverage against the deep fade and those sort of things that we saw K1 Williams struggling with. Those are similar things that Deommodore Lenoir struggled with as well. So I think they do need to fix the nickel corner spot still. And if they plan on going draft pick, they're going to have to get somebody that can get it done. And maybe it's as easy as Ambry Thomas is going to play on the outside and Mosley's going to move inside. But I don't know that for sure right now.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that either. Zion Johnson, someone had brought him up, interior offensive lineman from BC. Have you watched any film on him?
Yeah, good.
You like him? Too good? You think he's going to go in the first?
Yeah, too good. He's going in the first.
There you go.
Yeah, I think Johnson will be one of the top 20 picks in the draft. So
it's fair because he's about a top 20 talent.
Yeah, there you go.
There it is, Ant. There it is indeed. And let's move on to another gentleman on the list for us here. Let's go to Luke Goedeke. You might as well. Someone else brought him up. Let's jump on down the board a little bit to Mr. Goedeke, who played some tackle, Ant, but probably translates better as an offensive guard. I won't make the argument for it because as much as I love him, I know you do too as well. Go ahead and start off Luke Goedeke here. What do you love about this guy out of Central Michigan?
Yeah, he's out of Central Michigan. I really liked some of his aggressiveness. To me, he was well polished. He had good hands. His kick slide was nice and smooth. He's actually one of these guys that I think could potentially come in and play guard while Mike McGlinchey's there and then kick out and play tackle in the NFL eventually. I have a lot of faith in this guy. I liked his film maybe more than a lot of the other guys that we're talking about. To me, he was one of those guys that he was nimble, he was quick. He had that.
Did he jump over the candlestick?
I mean, if you want him to, he'll paint your back fence. He'll do whatever you need, Alex. He's a man of many skills and traits. But yeah, he's a very solid prospect. I really liked him a lot. And he's somebody that I haven't watched a whole lot of film, just recently got onto him. But yeah, I liked what I've seen so far. And play in and play out, he's competing. And that's something you want on your football team. So yeah, he's a nice prospect. And I think you're right. Moving into guard, he'd be a big guard initially, a tall guy. But eventually, I think he could move out to right tackle if you decide to move off Mike McGlinchey.
True. I agree with you there. He very much could be that for this team. A lot of the knock on him is the level of competition, obviously, that he played against.
Yeah.
People like the things that they saw, but how much was he really tested? Can you really evaluate his ability to anchor down when he's not playing against potentially NFL level caliber linemen? He did play against some guys in that sense, in that regard, and I didn't see anything from Goedeke that made me go, no, he's incapable. There's just going to be some growing pains with him. There's going to be some things he has to learn. But I think there's not a lot of questions with the run blocking. I don't dislike anything that he does. And I think the move inside to guard is not just better for him. It just naturally makes sense. And I'm surprised that there's some places that have rated him so low and haven't even tried to put him in as a guard prospect. They just put him as a tackle. They put him in a box, and they're willing to throw him down at the back end of this draft and just say, it's just not going to work out there. You're right. It might not work out there. That's because it may better suit you to put him on the interior, but that just makes him more versatile as well and makes him an option that San Francisco Niners are going to look at. Oh, a guy who played tackle we could throw in on the inside and work on and have Coach Forster work with this gentleman on getting himself ready to play guard in this league and be an option for us in case someone goes down. I do like this as a developmental piece for the Niners to draft.
Yeah, he's scheme fit. He's
Absolutely.
Scheme fit and a developmental player. Like if you're drafting him in the area that he's going to be drafted, you want Chris Forster to be able to develop him. And that's why I said you kick him inside, you let him compete, and then eventually maybe he could take over for Mike McGlinchey, down the road. I do think he has a nasty streak to him. What I like is a lot of the technique things are pretty clean. I mean, there's things he needs to work on, of course. He plays tall sometimes. I mean, he's 6'6". I mean, people are going to play tall. This is just something he needs to work on. I think that if he does, He could develop into a great player, and I think he has more talent potential than somebody like Colton McKivitz or Justin Skule. So yeah, I'm excited about potentially bringing him in and adding him to this team in this depth. There you go. You just want to get better even in the depth areas, and he would do that.
Very true. Jayla just asked about my cousin from Boston College and Tyler Vrabel, because apparently I look like the Vrabels.
There you go.
Not as big on Tyler Vrabel. I think there's some things there that he has to work on. He's definitely not ready. He's not ready to be anything right now. I don't even know. Do you think he's going to get drafted?
No.
I don't think he's going to be either. I think he's going to be an undrafted guy. And I don't think he ends up in San Francisco. I know he played in a system that could be considered
undrafted. Where do you think he's going to end up?
He's going to end up with his father.
Of course he is.
He's going to end up with his father. He'll end up on the practice
squad.
squad.
I hope the Patriots offer more money.
They might. They honestly
despite
might.
him. No, I'm just kidding.
It's true. And Sean had asked, not Sean, Caesar just asked about Rhyan from UCLA. That was the first guy that we actually talked about.
Yeah, we talked about him first.
So you can head on back to the beginning of the video real quick and get your little fill there of Sean Rhyan, and then hop back up here to live. But that was the first guy that we talked about. A guy that is a very dynamic and could be a good fit for San Francisco for the 49ers, and definitely might be available at 61.
Yeah, I like him.
Agreed with you there. Agreed with you there. And let's talk about another guy, Ant. Another gentleman who is a tackle prospect per se, but might work out very well. And I've called him Mcglinchey, Ant. I've called and referred to him as Mcglinchey because I feel he is the inverse of what Mike Mcglinchey is, and I like that about him, actually. Kellen Diesch from Arizona State as well. Tackle that you and I both think, if you move this guy inside the guard, fireworks.
Yeah, the question with Diesch is the run blocking. The pass blocking is absolutely superb.
It's phenomenal.
He's good. Sometimes, I mean, he looks a little tall, but I think it's just the way he looks because of his slender frame. But he's one of those guys that gets after it. He's definitely a scheme fit, just like his teammate Donovan West. Both guys are scheme fits for the 49ers. And the 49ers are going to get some good info from their head coach about who they are and how they operate. But I think he would be a nice fit. The question is, could he develop in the run game fast enough? The same thing we had with Jalen Moore last year, where the Niners drafted a really good pass blocker who needed to develop the run game. That's what you would be doing with Kellen as well. So will the 49ers take that route? Maybe potentially he could play inside, but he could also be your developmental replacement for Mike Mcglinchey if that was an area you wanted to go. Played left tackle in college, but could translate to right tackle in the NFL. In fact, I think most people would think he would be a right tackle in the NFL. And then potentially there's your pass blocking right tackle on the opposite of Trent Williams. But the run game would have to improve, and Chris Forrester would have to believe that he could help develop Kellen's ability to change the way he run blocks. Because right now there's not a lot of physicality there. There's not a lot of moving people off their spots, and that needs to change some. And if they believe that's a potential, then they would do that. But as far as a guy that's going to be in the middle rounds, a third round, potentially late second, early third round, I think third round. Yeah, that'd be a solid pick for the Niners.
I don't hate that, in all honesty.
Yeah.
When I watched this film, the immediate thought process was the 180 polar opposite of what Mcglinchey does well. This guy does well, and the areas that Mcglinchey struggles, Mcglinchey struggles are his strengths. His weaknesses are Mcglinchey's strengths. So maybe being able to feed off of one another can help him. I don't know, but I do enjoy a lot of the things that this guy does. He was actually the reason I even stumbled across Donovan West in the first place. So I was watching this film and being like, oh my goodness gracious almighty, I love him. And then was watching Donovan West dominate there in the run game and was like, well, can we just take the two of you and mesh you into one person and just have like the greatest lineman that's ever existed at the college level? This guy is fantastic. I love his versatility. I love what he could be. Let's talk about another thing about a guy who's got some versatility but could become something special. I think you and I both really enjoy Spencer Buford out of University of Texas San Antonio. They got themselves a couple good prospects that are coming into this draft who I don't think people are paying attention to that could light up the league.
Yeah, a lot of athleticism. I mean, a lot of getting to the second level and making people pay for it. Yeah, I like Spencer Buford. I think that he would be a nice fit for the 49ers in their scheme. I like his hand placement. I like his heavy hands. There's some development things that need to go there. So he's a guy that you're going to bring in and expect to develop, but he's a nice attitude guy. I mean, you see the kind of some of the toughness and aggressiveness from him that I want to see from my offensive lineman. I remember I had an offensive line coach that I coached with, and I was telling him that he needed to help teach the kids attitude. Let's get these kids, going at a high level with attitude. And he's like, how do you teach attitude? I was like, for some people it's an acquired thing. For some people it can be taught. I think this guy, it's just an acquired thing. Like he's ready to roll at all times, and you like that aggressiveness and that ability inside your locker room. So yeah, I would definitely like this pick for the Niners.
Agreed. He likes being physical as well, and I love that. And did you know he actually has an NFL pedigree in terms of family members who've been in the league? Both Adrian Waddle and Sam Hurd, both of his cousins, played in the NFL.
Sam Hurd, nice.
Yeah, so this is a guy who's got NFL bloodline coursing through those veins, and 4-star signing when he signed at the University of Texas San Antonio, which you don't typically see 4-star guys going to a school like that. Smaller school.
Why not? Maybe he just wanted to be next to Candy R Collectibles.
He might have been wanted to be near Candy R Collectibles, and I don't blame him for that. That's a funny dude. But this guy was a starter since he was a true freshman. So this is a guy who has developed along the way, has held that line down there for the University of Texas San Antonio, who just had one of their better seasons and better teams, and this is a reason why. This guy is physical. He's got a little bit of a mean streak in him. I love his upside, his athleticism, everything that he could potentially bring to the table and what he could become is big, and he's 6'5". And that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, he's the opposite of Kellen that we just talked about.
Correct. Correct.
So, I mean, but yeah, he's got a lot of potential. I like him a lot. In fact, I would love him in like the 5th or 6th round, and 6th round especially. If the Niners could get him in the 6th round, that'd be great.
It would be absolutely fantastic. My guy, San Antonio out of nowhere, said JLE. He said, thoughts on Utah's guard, N. Ford, and BYU center, MC. MC, I think, is the guy.
Yeah, I remember I talked to you a little bit about MC. I haven't watched a whole lot of film on MC yet, so I need to get more into that before I get a detailed breakdown of that. He's one that I'm still working on. I'm going to be honest, I'm still working on some of the later round guys in the interior offensive line. We worked on as many of the guys that we thought would be in the area for the 49ers. So he's somebody I need to watch, but initial thoughts were not a bad prospect, but I definitely want to watch more game film because you want to see how it is play in and play out. You just don't want to see it in like a little short spurts. So I'll watch him for sure. So MC is somebody I'm still looking forward to watching film on.
Agreed with you there. And is there a prognostics on Mcglinchey? Asked Android user. I remember hearing that he was just barely started walking without crutches.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. I just heard John Lynch say that Mike Mcglinchey was on target with his rehab. So that would mean that he's, expected to be back. The fact the 49ers didn't go out and try to address, tackle in free agency, because you would think, and this is what I would do if I was a general manager, is if I knew that there was a possibility Mike Mcglinchey wasn't going to come back, unless I thought Jalen Moore was going to be the starter at right tackle, I would have went out and got one of these, free agent guys where you could assign him to a deal like they did Lael Collins, where it's a very low number this year and then, and work it out. But you also could have restructured some more contracts to make that happen, because that's something that's very important to this football team. So my belief is they either believe Mcglinchey will be ready, or they believe Jalen Moore is ready to ascend to that right tackle spot. And if Jalen Moore is ready to ascend and he's going to be pushing Mike Mcglinchey this year, that changes everything for 2023.
You were correct. It does change a lot of things for 2023, my guy. Let's move on to Luke Wattenberg, a guy that I haven't watched as much film on, Ant, but you have. I'm assuming you like this guy a little bit. This is a guy late in drafts that is starting to catch some people's attention and catch some people's eye. I just recently stumbled across his film and started stumbling across it and watching a little bit more of him. What do you like about Wattenberg? Oh,
Wattenberg, I thought, was a solid guy. I mean, he's not one of those guys that his traits jump off, but it seems he always gets to the right spot, and he works it, well. He can get off balance as well. He can play tall. I think he lacks a little bit of the athleticism that some of the other guys we've talked about. So scheme fit wise, you might question if he's going to ultimately fit, but we're talking about a guy that's going to be a late, 6th, 7th round guy, potentially even undrafted. So I think that he's got some development there, and I think the questions I have about him are his footwork. He doesn't have quick feet, and slow feet don't eat, and I think he needs to work on his feet. And he needs to get everything together there. But I do see some potential in some of the ways that he handles himself. So as a late round pick, he would make sense, but he's got to pull it together. So he would be a developmental guy. To be honest with you, if they took him late in the draft, I would not expect him to make this 49ers roster. I would think he would eventually have potential to be on the practice squad.
That makes sense, Ant. That does make sense. This is also a guy in high school who played tackle. He's played tackle, he's played center, and he's played guard.
Yeah.
When I started diving into the film and saw some things, I was like, all right, there's something here. Let's start actually taking a look at this guy. Will the Niners actually draft him? When I saw that he played tackle in high school and was playing center and guard in college, I was like, okay, well, yeah, this kind of makes sense. This is definitely a guy, if the Niners don't necessarily, let's say they only go after one gentleman and they go after a solidified, like a guy who's a guard tackle sort of hybrid, who doesn't have center potentiality or versatility there, this could be a guy that they look at later in this draft.
Well, he played for Jim Harbaugh, which means he's going to be pro ready. He's at least going to have an understanding of what he's supposed to do in the NFL. But there's going to be a lot of development. And we've seen some of the other guys that have come out of the Michigan program that have been late round picks like Rhyan that have been able to go in and actually hold down his spot. So potentially he could do that. But I think he is lower on the list for the 49ers.
He is definitely lower on the list. And another guy who's this one's odd. We talked about this before. And Cam Jurgens, you and I both like him out of Nebraska. Really do. But I have told you there are people who have him pegged as an undrafted free agent. I can't wrap my head around it because when I watch the film, no part of me thinks, this is what an undrafted free agent looks like? This is what an undrafted free agent looks like? Are we sure about this, guys, who have put him in this category? And these are big name sites that have done this that people go to for draft analysis. I almost can't wrap my head around it. Cam Jurgens out of Nebraska, though, is fiery. At times, it feels like he's wild with how he plays. But talk about a guy who gets off the snap quick, fires out, initiate contact at the point of attack. You don't have to worry about people getting into Cam Jurgens. Cam Jurgens is getting into people before they can even blink.
Yeah, I like Cam a lot. I think that's what it's about. It's about physicality. He likes his job and he gets after it and he enjoys, knocking people off their spot. So this is one of those guys that you like for attitude reasons. And we've talked about some other ones like Buford as well. These are guys that are nasty, and you want to add nasty players to your offensive line when everything is about the run game. You know what Trent Williams is? He's absolutely nasty. Mike Mcglinchey, absolutely nasty. These guys get after it. You've watched Alex Mack for 2 seconds after a play. He's just bugging everyone on the field. That's just what these guys do. They're antagonists, and this guy's one of them. I don't think he's one of those guys that's going to go undrafted. I think he's going to go in the 3rd or 4th round, and I think he's going to be a bang-up selection for somebody. I would love for the Niners to be able to bring him in as a backup center to Alex Mack, learn, develop, and then potentially be able to take over in 2023 or 2024 if Alex Mack, decided to live out the rest of his contract. So I think that he's a solid player for the 49ers, and I love the aggressiveness. I wouldn't make him my number one center because I think Lindstrom is my number one center from the guys that we've talked about.
Agreed.
That could potentially land with San Francisco, but he's the second best. Like, he's the next guy that I really like.
And it's not close. No. I don't have it close. It's Lindstrom and then it's Jurgens. And you were correct. This is a guy who loves his job. I just saw Candy Our Collectible saying Cam Jurgens was the only good part of the O-line this season for Nebraska.
KDR is a Nebraska fan.
He is a Nebraska fan. Him and I have talked about this. And he said there's not really a lot to root with Nebraska. He goes and he told me literally, except for Cam Jurgens. That's what he told me.
KDR Collectibles' dad did not help him out. Cincinnati Reds fan, Nebraska fan.
Gosh.
But you got to remember the Big Red Machine was going strong when his dad was a fan. And then Nebraska was Tommy Frazier and all those guys. So. KDR not set up, he's also a Sacramento Kings fan, not set up for greatness.
My God. Yeah, I know how that feels.
He can blame his dad for that. But his dad got to live out the glory days of Johnny Bench and then Tommy Frazier and all those great teams there. So
good for him.
Sorry, Caleb.
It's good for Pops, not good for Caleb.
No.
But as for Mr. Jurgens, this is a guy who I baffled by some of the stuff that I saw and the reports of this guy, not being a guy who potentially could go in the top 100 or was borderline at least a top 100 player. People putting him like in the 170, 200s. I saw one place had him at like 3 something. I could not wrap my head around it. I don't know what you're seeing on film that makes you think that way. I think they see a couple of games where he didn't necessarily have his great moment or didn't play necessarily his best. But if you're watching his film, there is no quit in when he's losing. Even when he loses, and he's almost winning. He gets to the point of attack in the right spot. He's getting leverage and getting guy driving in a direction, and a guy either just overpowers or just a hard block to make, a tough block to make, and almost like people want to knock the guy for not completing a tough block. You're not gonna hit on everything. You're not gonna hit on all of your assignments all of the time. But when your coach is putting you in difficult positions, he's putting you there because you're talented and because he believes you can get the job done. You wouldn't be putting your players in those positions and calling those types of plays and having that guy consistently be your center, snap in, snap out, play in, play out, if you didn't think he could get the job done. And I watched enough of Cam Jurgens' film to be able to notice when he's just not capable or not good enough, or when it's just an issue of, sometimes you get beat. Sometimes things like that happens. The motor he plays with, the intensity he plays with, the drive he plays with, there's no part of me that doesn't think that this guy, whoever drafts this guy, is going to get a guy who's going to essentially will himself into being your starting center at some point in time in the league.
Yeah, that's why he would flourish in San Francisco. he would flourish in Miami. Those are places he's going to flourish with excellent run games because then he's going to be able to get after it. He likes to go forward and he likes to move people off their spot. And if you could get a run game going with him, then his pass blocking would be even more efficient and better. And he would win more times than he loses. So, yeah, he's a solid pickup if the Niners can get him. In fact, every time I mock draft, that's who I'm landing on. I'm landing him as one of the interior offensive linemen. I really like him a lot. A lot of the guys we've talked about, though. Donovan West is another guy that I really like, that I land on all the time, of course. But, yeah, there's a lot of good players.
Cole Strange as well.
I did draft Cole Strange a couple times, but, of course, Dylan Parham is my guy now.
Dylan Parham is phenomenal, my guy. And Bomber just asked, you guys look up Cole Strange? We did. And we talked about him. We talked about him a little bit ago. So if you missed that, rewind it or just wait a little bit of time because all of these live streams that we're doing right now, timestamps for the individuals. So you can click on those over here on YouTube, take you right to the gentleman. So you don't have to scroll through and wait. You can just, there's certain guys you want to hear and talk about and you want to listen to those guys. Boom, there you go, problem solved.
Yeah, and Cole Strange is a solid prospect. You're going to want to hear that because we did break him down.
Absolutely, Ant. We did break him down. A couple of guys who are interesting prospects, but I don't know if the Niners are going to actually necessarily be going after these guys. And we had talked about these pre-show, and were guys like Ed Ingram out of LSU, guys like Marquise Hayes out of Oklahoma, and oh man, who was the other gentleman that we were talking about? There was one other guy, and Lectus Smith out of Virginia Tech. All three guys, there's some nice things there about them on film. I just don't know necessarily if it translates to San Francisco's scheme.
Yeah, I didn't really like Smith. You
didn't like Lectus Smith?
Lectus. Yeah,
Lectus?
I can't even say his
I think
first
it's
name.
Lectus
Sorry.
Smith.
I'm just going to call him Smith.
There you go.
I didn't like his film for the 49ers scheme fit. I thought he fit a lot of different schemes and he'd be successful, playing a left guard spot in the NFL. I just didn't see him as a scheme fit for the 49ers. So he wasn't one that I continued to watch a lot of film on. I watched some, decided it wasn't a scheme fit, and then moved on. That's kind of how I operate because I want to break down the players and spend the most time on the players that fit what the Niners do. I should probably have learned from my mistakes. This is what I did to Aaron Banks last year, but I did it again. And then Ingram, I actually liked. I did like Ingram. I thought there were some really positives about him. So I think the 49ers could potentially be interested in him. I just don't think that they would value him enough at 61 to be able to make that. And I don't think he'd make it to 93. So he's one of those guys that...
He's a tweener.
Yeah, he's a tweener where you don't love him at 61, but you would like him at 93, and I don't think he's still going to be there.
And he finishes, though. Ingram finishes.
He's good, yeah.
This is a guy who puts...
Well, none of these guys are like bad. They all got a lot of great traits, and if they're in the right scheme with the right coaches and talent around them, they're going to be good football players.
The elite stuff's going to shine through even more with a lot of these guys in the right situations. Marquise Hayes is an interesting one because from what I saw out of him, there's a lot of athleticism there and a lot of potential there. I do like his ability to get up to second level. Very active in screen games as well, which is something a couple of these guys have shown as well. So I do like Marquise Hayes. I just don't know. I don't know if he's going to be making the transition inside because he did play some tackle as well. He does have some versatility, so that does make him something the Niners are going to look at and go, "Oh, you can do multiple things, eh?" Rubs evil goatee chin hair and then goes, "Maybe we take you instead." And they draft them, and they could do that. They 100% could.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting part is going to be that not only is Chris Forster going to coach the offensive line, but he's going to be a run game coordinator this year as well.
True.
And you've seen this come now with John Benton being with the New York Jets and being their run game coordinator. Transition for these offensive line coaches to be run game coordinators, there's going to be a heavy emphasis on the things that their guys do well. So they're going to want to draft guys that are going to be able to implement into the style of run game that they want to run. And we know what that is for the Niners, right? You want to have guys that are quick and agile, that are able to run to be able to block in the outside zone, but also able to pull and be able to move people off their spots, in the gap scheme. So I think that these guys are going to, that's what they're looking for. There's a very detailed oriented way of looking at it. But I think the Niners do look run first on all their offensive linemen. So if you're not a good run blocker, you don't fit in San Francisco. And I think that that's how it goes. That's why when we talked about Kellen Diesch, that was an interesting guy because he doesn't really fit in the run department. The only thing we could signal to that is that Jalen Moore also didn't. So if they think he can develop, then he's a possibility. But everyone we talked about today pretty much is pretty good at the run game and then is adequate at the pass. And some of them better than others.
Correct. And Jalen just asked, what about Kentucky? How about the Kentucky Cats? And there are some guys. Luke Fortner is definitely a name to keep an eye on. He's going to be a later round guy. This is not, you don't watch Luke Fortner film and see explosive blocking. Like that's just not, you're not going to get that with Fortner. What you are going to see though is a guy who moves guys off of his spot, He's pretty technically sound. He gets his hips around his space, creates a lot of run opening lanes, which is why he's going to probably fit. He'd fit fairly well. We've seen that a lot with Daniel Brunskill. You don't see Daniel Brunskill making highlight big type style plays. And so if you're the Niners and think he's going to go get paid in the offseason, a guy like Fortner is a guy you could bring in, ideally thinking, hey, maybe this guy could slot in behind a Daniel Brunskill or could get to Daniel Brunskill type levels and be, formidable in those situations. I don't know if he necessarily has the same issues as a pass pro guy as Brunskill. I have seen him anchor down fairly well on film a couple of times. But this isn't a guy who is going to be dominant in pass pro sets on the interior, but he's not a liability either.
Yeah, he's another guy I haven't got to. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke.
There's a lot of guys.
Blow smoke out there that, I've broke this guy down. I haven't got to him. He's somebody that since JLE brought it up, I'll go ahead and take a look at him, because he said the Kentucky Cats. So I'll get into it and I'll check him out and see what I think. I think there's a couple guys now that people have brought up that I need to watch more film on. One I watched a little bit of film, and this one I haven't watched any film on yet. So I need to really break them down and see what we think. But I mean, there's just so many guys at so many different positions. It's a lot. It's a lot of work to get after these guys. So no, I definitely haven't saw him. So I have nothing to add to this besides what you already said, Alex.
Look, here's the other thing too with Fortner that you can't rule out, and something that's been said a lot of times already today and just this episode. Looked a lot better when he moved from guard to center. So there you go. He can play guard, he can play center, and the San Francisco 49ers in the sixth round, fifth round, maybe looking at this guy and being like, this is an option. This is not, we can do a lot of different things with you. Screaming Daniel Brunskill more and more every day.
Well, then I'll watch him and I'll keep that in mind and see if I think that a transition to center is possible.
JL just brought up your boy Darian Kinnard, man.
Okay, I was trying to avoid this, but no, I have actually watched Kinnard.
You have watched Kinnard. Kinnard.
Yeah, I have watched him. I don't think he's a scheme fit for the 49ers. I know a lot of people are huge on him, and I saw a lot of people, banging the table that he needs to be the guy for the Niners at 61. I don't think so. I think you're running the risk of him being, a developmental piece that just never develops. So I think that he is a scheme fit for a lot of teams. I don't see it for San Francisco. I wouldn't draft him at 61. And I don't see the value at 93 either. So he's not one of my favorite guys in this draft. But, I mean, it's the eye of the beholder.
It is.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. But, no, he's not one of my favorite guys in the draft. I thought mobility-wise, decent, not great. Aggressiveness, it was pretty good. But I worry about him being able to play tackle. Now, if you're moving him into guard, it's a little bit of a better situation.
It is.
But I'm still not huge on this. I like a lot of other guys in this draft so much better that are more athletic, that are better with their hands, that are getting after it in a different way. And I would go that route.
There is possibility and potential with Kinnard, but it is possibility and potential. And at 61, it's way too early. And on my sheet that I have him highlighted, but it's a different color than the rest of them. Because it's one of those things where it's like the Solomon Thomas situation. If I don't have to take him where people think he's going to go, and I can take him way later, then it's a net positive for San Francisco.
It's a value pick, yeah.
It's an extremely valuable pick there, and a value pick indeed. But if you have to take him where you take him, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, because I don't see those elite traits that make me go, this guy is something that is worth the risk at 61 in order to take. The later he gets, the better the value is. The at 61, it's not enough there. I would rather go after a guy like Parham in that situation than take a guy like this.
No, I just like Parham as a prospect better even.
Correct.
I just think he's a better prospect. I think he's a better fit for the 49ers. I like the way he plays a little bit better. That's just my opinion. I mean, lots of people can see it other ways. I seen JL, he said, position versatility, or he could play multiple positions. Yeah, I think he would have to, because I don't see him fitting the 49ers scheme at right tackle. Maybe he fits other schemes at right tackle in the NFL, but I haven't been a huge fan of him since I watched film and I've seen all the buzz that was going on 49ers Twitter. So he was one of the first guys I broke down, and I just walked away from it being like, no.
I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
I get it. DZ Egum had asked earlier, Coach said Banks is ready to go. From what you guys know, do you agree? I didn't see. He said DZ Egum said Coach said Banks is ready to go. From what you guys know, do you agree?
I haven't seen enough, so I'm gonna have to trust what Kyle Shanahan says. If him and Chris Forster believe that Aaron Banks is going to be ready to roll, then he's ready to roll. What we saw in training camp was a guy that really struggled. Maurice Hurst absolutely made this guy feel, like he was not ready. We saw it consistently through training camp until he got hurt in training camp, and then that slowed his development as well. Well, you got to believe that he got better, because as the season progressed, he went from being, inactive for games to being active. And so that would show that he's improved enough for the 49ers felt comfortable with him being a potential option if somebody got injured. So I think there's been improvement. I think he's been working his butt off during the offseason to get better. And a lot of it was about improving lateral quickness and also improving, his weight because he was 335 pounds. They wanted him to be around 320. So those are things he needed to work on. And if he did, then he has a potential to start. He's a very good pass blocker. His run blocking sometimes he needs to get a little bit better at it because he needs to be able to get to the second level and stick. He doesn't always stick on those guys. So that's something he's going to work on. But potentially, he has the ability. He really does. He just hadn't shown the development. Nothing that we've saw because he didn't play any games in the end of the season could tell us that he's going to be a starter or not.
Very true. And I want to let you get to your boy Andrew Stuber from Michigan before we get anywhere else crazy, because I know you like this guy a lot out of Michigan. I haven't watched as much film. I know you have.
Yeah, I did. I like him. I think he's a solid player for sure. I wrote down guard. That was one of the first things I saw when I watched him on film. Once again, it's another guy that I think potentially is ready to play in the NFL. But I liked his ability. It wasn't anything that was like elite that jumped off the books. But I saw him kind of in the Colton McKivitz mold as far as style of play. I just think he may be a little bit better, but that's the kind of value I put on him.
That's good value right there.
Yeah.
You can't complain about that type of value. And I know there's people right now going, but guys, you didn't talk about the dude from Minnesota. You didn't talk about Falele. Are you going to talk about him with the tackles? Probably not. Good chance we're not going to.
Oh, Daniel Falele?
Yeah, we're not going to talk about Falele.
Daniel Falele is not a scheme fit for the San Francisco 49ers.
No, you know who would be a scheme fit, Ant, that won't be available, though? Tyler Smith from Tulsa.
Yeah?
It's just sad.
That's true.
It's just sad. It really, truly is just sad. Cutback crew, right now is question time for you. If you got questions, if you got guys that we didn't talk about that you want us to bring up and mention, now is the time. Let us know. Forktail said, Banks being ready is crucial. I'm so glad to hear the positive statement about him. Look, I think it's great for everyone to feel better about the Aaron Banks situation.
Yeah.
It seems like the drafting of Banks was almost always intended to be developmental. You hoped it was going to be more than that, but if not, that's A-okay. You felt pretty good with the offensive line as it currently was, and you knew you had a guy sitting there waiting in the wings in case you couldn't bring back a Lincoln Tomlinson.
Yeah, I never fear development. When a guy comes in as a rookie and he's not able to start day one, I don't fear that because you draft players on their potential, what they could be. There's lots of guys in the draft that are going to be ready day one, and they're going to go out there and maybe don't have as high of a top end, high of a ceiling as some of the other guys. I think Aaron Banks does have a high ceiling. There's potential there, but he had to be able to develop. He had to learn this scheme and be able to position his body to the right way. And he also had to condition his body the right way.
That's
he had
right.
to get in shape so he could be able to make the blocks that he was going to be asked to make and maneuver his body the way that he needed to make it. But like Kyle Shanahan said last year, if you can have the biggest guy possible that is able to do what you want him to do, you go get it. And I think that's what they found with Banks. Now, potentially, he could grow into that left guard spot, and you could feel comfortable with him taking over with Lincoln Tomlinson. But we're not going to know how comfortable that is until we see him in training camp, and then we start seeing him in the preseason and how he developed, because lateral quickness was the big question, and if he's fixed that, then he'll be ready to roll.
Yeah, he will be ready to roll, Ant, if he's able to fix that there. JLA said, like the Tulsa tackle, he loves him, man. I like to see it. Michigan always produces good O-line player. They are run first, much like the Niners.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, that pro-style, coaching. You're going to get those guys who are going to be able to step in day one and be able to produce for your team. But when you're drafting players, a lot of times you will take into account, what system they come from or what coach has been coaching them. And then you will understand where they could possibly go with it. But yeah, they're going to have a different understanding. And a lot of times with offensive line, it's a little bit different. You're looking for more clean looks and clean ability and smoothness than you are elite traits like you are from some of the other positions. You want guys that can do it consistently well all the time. So consistency is very important for offensive linemen.
Very much is, Ant. Very much is. That is 100% accurate. Brad just said, ideal first 3 picks for me. Christian Watson, James Cook, and a solid center.
Oh, solid corner.
Oh, solid corner. Is that what he said? Oh, corner. My apologies.
Yeah.
I misread that. Solid corner. I like that there.
Yeah, and I've seen James Cook kind of being in the 100 area of the draft, potentially the compensatory pick. That's not a bad move there. He's a solid, smooth, running back. That could add a lot to the 49ers roster, so I wouldn't be against it. I think that is a definite upgrade of the third down back right away from JaMychal Hasty, with the ability for him to develop even into a 3-down back down the road. But he would be a nice complement to Elijah Mitchell, to Trey Sermon, and to Jeff Wilson Jr.
I like that, Ant. I like that a lot there. Question for you. If you could walk away with one lineman in this draft, who is it?
Ooh, I want Dylan Parham. That's what I'm going to walk away with. I mean, because I know I'm not going to get the guys at the top of the
Correct. You got to take the guys at the top out because you're not getting those guys.
Then that's who I want to walk away with. I think coming before like the last couple of days of watching more film, I would have said Lindstrom. That was the guy I was really high on.
Okay.
But now I'm going to go with Parham because I think that he's one of those guys that can develop into a really good offensive lineman in the league. And I think that they can develop him. He fits what Kyle Shanahan wants to do, and I love it. He played left guard, so he could come in and compete right away. Maybe not with Banks, but you could possibly play him at right guard as well. I want competition on the interior offensive line.
True. You really do. I think Parham is up there with me. If I couldn't get a guy like Parham, I would probably try and get two guys, maybe a little bit later. I'd try and get a Cam Jurgens and try and get a Kellen Diesch.
You like Cam Jurgens?
I think that would right there is there's your backup center sitting there waiting and developing in the wings, and a guy like Diesch who has abilities as a tackle, but maybe you throw him in on the guard spot there with Mcglinchey next to him, and you've flip-flopped abilities. Or you put him at tackle, put Mcglinchey in at guard, knowing we got a guy who needs to develop as a run blocking aspect, but now we got a right tackle who can for sure pass block, and he's swell at it. And Mcglinchey now gets a little bit of help on the inside.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they build this roster and build the offensive line because they have some solid depth pieces right now, but some of these depth pieces are going to be asked to step in and be on the starting lineup. If Daniel Brunskill is slated to be the starting right guard, then I think it's Aaron Banks, and then you have solid depth behind them. That's if Mcglinchey's healthy. If not, if Mcglinchey's not healthy, Moore starting at right tackle, Brunskill starting at guard, Banks is starting at guard, you have questions about the depth. So you need to develop extra players and draft extra players to be depth pieces for your team.
You definitely do. You have to get depth pieces, Ant. Depth is kind of important. And the Niners have been very, very good at depth, Ant. We'll see if that continues. We'll see if that trend continues.
Yeah.
If you're a betting man, yes, it's going to continue. So if the casinos give you odds on that, take those odds. The Niners will get depth. That's going to happen. John Nevisher said, screw it, just bring in as many Memphis players as we can and get already. We already missed out on Antonio Gibson, Darrell Henderson, Tony Pollard, Jake Elliott, and others. Don't overlook Calvin Austin III is what he's saying.
Okay, yeah.
Interesting.
Calvin Austin III is an interesting player, and I think he would have been huge on the 49ers radar pre-Ray McLeod signing. I think that they're similar players, and I think that Ray McLeod has already been proven that he can do it in the NFL. And I love a proven commodity a little bit more than somebody I could get in the draft, but I get the allure of him. At 5'7", 173 pounds, but with his dynamic speed, he's somebody you're interested in bringing in. He's got some dynamics in special teams as well. I understand that. And then as far as, Antonio Gibson was one of my guys coming out of the draft, so I love that. I saw the wide back potential. The fact that Memphis used him playing receiver, they used him playing running back, I would have loved that for the 49ers. So, yeah, Memphis puts out some good players. SMU's been putting out some very talented players.
SMU has as well.
So, yeah, you do not want to miss on players, but you're hoping you can get them in the round in which you want to get them. So,
it's true.
There's a lot of talent there. John's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong, man. San Francisco, not wrong. And
I forgot. I believe San Francisco is from that area, right?
That's true.
Yeah, I believe from Tennessee.
There it is.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, let me know if I'm wrong, John. But I believe that's true.
If that's the case, it would make sense why he's very familiar with those Memphis Tigers out there, Ant.
Yeah,
some very talented individuals out there, Ant. And look, I think this is going to be a very interesting situation. I think the Niners here have a lot of options they can go with, and a lot of routes they can take to address offensive line, especially on the interior with the guys that we just talked about. Dylan could slide to us. Makes a lot of sense, and ... said PV50, and BV's not wrong.
Yep,
Dylan Parham would be phenomenal there at that spot. Is there one guy that would be better than that at that spot at 61, and is there a name that you can think of that
on the offensive line,
or just another player? Maybe that's not an offensive lineman.
Yeah, I think you've seen it in chat for a long time.
Oh, it's Watson.
One of these. No, it's not. Doesn't have to be Watson either. I'd be interested in taking Mechie. I think Mechie is going to be dynamite in the NFL. I think Watson is the number one option between the two of them because he's 6'4" and he runs a sub 4.3 40 at 211 pounds. I think he's going to be a good blocker at the next level. But I think he takes your offense to another level. But I think John Mechie could do the same sort of thing. The question is which offensive linemen are going to be there. If Dylan Parham is going to be there at 93, you can take that approach and get somebody else at 61. If he's not, potentially what you want to do is select someone at 61 and then come up from 93. Use your draft capital to come up. You don't have to draft 9 players. You don't have to use those 9 picks. You want to walk away with 5 or 6 players in the top 150 players because the other guys aren't going to make your roster. Your roster is completely stacked with really good football players. So why draft players that are going to end up playing for another football team? No, you draft 5 or 6 really solid players that have potential not only to make your roster, but make your team better.
And you course correct from last year, and in which you were aggressive, but not aggressive enough to get the guys that you really truly wanted. If those guys are sitting there at 61, get them. And if there's someone else that's still there that's high on your board that you're like, man, we're probably going to get this guy, but if this guy's here, we can take him at 61. If he falls to that spot, you grab him, you package picks, you come up, you get as many in the top 150 as you can. This was what we said last year the Niners needed to do, right? And it's the same this year. You have a deep team. You have a team that doesn't have a lot of holes necessarily to fill. So go get the most talented guys that you can and make sure that you assemble the best 53-man roster possible.
Yeah, and Jay only said he voted yes for Mecchi, but would love either if they're there. I voted for Mecchi as well. I did. I voted for Mecchi. I just think there's something spectacular about him and what he could add to the 49ers offense and the things that Kyle Shanahan could do with him. I love both players. I really do.
True.
I just think the height of Christian Watson makes him a more appealing option for the Niners potentially.
True.
But I would love it. And you're right. The aggressive nature the 49ers need to operate in this draft is very important. When you're looking at those 9 picks, you don't need to walk away with 9 players. Use that currency. I mean, you don't have to have, you don't have to have 9 guys. That's what's crazy. I've seen some of the mock drafts on Twitter and stuff, and I enjoy watching them because I want to see what people are thinking. But I see people that trade back, and end up with 15 players in their mock draft. The 49ers don't have room for 15 players.
Nope.
That's how you end up having a tight end play for the New York Giants after you just drafted him. That's how you end up having players that you drafted playing for other football teams because you don't have room for them. You can't afford to make 9 selections. So I think they're going to do something there and potentially go out and just target their players. I don't think Christian Watson is going to be at 61, though.
No, I don't think so either, Ant. It's going to be very interesting to see who is available at 61. We just talked about some names who would be.
Yep.
We also talked about names that the Niners could just use to fill up that interior O-line. Let us know in the comment section below which of those guys you really, really enjoyed. If you're listening on traditional podcast platforms after this live stream has already come out, Ant, make sure you give us a rating as well. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're listening on one of those traditional audio platforms, hop over sometime and check it out. But also, if you are in the Northern California area, you're going to want to make sure you come and check out our draft party that we're going to be having in Galt, California at the Back Alley Brewery.
That's right.
It's a nice venue, really nice. I like it.
Beautiful, Ant.
Yeah, beautiful. And we're going to have a lot of fun out there, and we're going to have some fun games and stuff going on along the way. But we're also going to produce, the draft content as only we can. Not only are you going to get live commentary from us, but also you can watch the draft with some of the big screen TVs that we're going to have out there. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of 49er fans. There's going to be a lot of people in general. It's going to be exciting. So if you have the opportunity, make sure you stop by.
Yeah, please stop by. It's going to be a blast. Beer pong tournaments, other things going on, raffles, and get to interact with us, the Cutback crew. Just be able to have a good time. Watch your team, the 49ers. And if you're not a 49ers fan, then just hang out with a bunch of football fans, talking football, watching the stream live in person, as well as just being able to enjoy the environment and the scenery that's out there. Tacos and lumpia, Ant. When I heard lumpia, I about died.
That's what sold you?
I was already going to be there regardless of whether or not lumpia was present, but lumpia is going to be there, and now I'm in heaven.
Yeah, and Robert Aguilar says, so guys, over and under 2 trades from the draft this year. I think it will be over. I think they're going to move up. I think they're going to move down. They're going to be strategic.
I think it's 2 exactly.
When it comes to John Lynch likes to move, and I think aggressiveness is going to show its head this time because they need to make sure they go get impact players. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't draft 3 or 4 times in the top 100. And so they could potentially move up from 61, move up from 93, or from 105. I wouldn't be shocked to see any of those or all of those as
True.
they use draft capital to make sure you move, because we do know that next season they're going to have a lot of compensatory picks.
Accurate.
Arden Key leaves, you get a 6th-round pick for Arden Key. So there's potential now for the 49ers to have a lot of draft picks in 2023. So take advantage of that draft capital this year and get some really impact players.
True. Some pancetta as well, says Jay Ellie. We'll work on it. We'll work on it, my guy. We'll work on it. Be there or be heard. No, Donald G. It's at Back Alley Brew. Be there or be a screw. That's what the motto is going to be from me anyway. Don't be a screw. Make sure they're April 29th, 4 to 8 p.m. at Back Alley Brew. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a lot of fun. And get ready, because that's going to get plugged a lot here on this channel between now and then, because we don't want you guys to forget.
No, exactly. And it's going to be an absolute blast. I can't wait. And I love the draft. And last year we did live stream the draft. We actually streamed rounds day one, day 2, and day 3. Yeah, so you can expect a lot of work from us. We are not going to be live streaming day 1. The 49ers don't have a pick. If they did jump in, possibly you could get a special live stream.
You will get a breaking live stream with probably me not ready at all and no shirt on because.
Why are you always having no shirt on?
I don't know. I do that.
It's weird. It's weird to me.
Well, I mean, look, I get really closed up on the podcast and then don't wear shirts when I'm not on the podcast. It makes sense.
Interesting.
It adds up. It balances out.
Yeah. I'm just going to wear multiple shirts around you.
That's fine.
That way I can make up for your lack of shirts.
That's probably smart, in all honesty. It's probably smart. David, we appreciate that. Awesome show, guys. As usual, I'm planning on being at the draft party. We will see you there. We'll see all of the Cutback crew who decide to show up. All of our friends, too, as well, who want to be there and hang out and have a good time. It is going to be a blast. And Brad Jones, last question of the night. What are the chances 61 isn't the Niners' first pick? I reckon it's almost 90% that they move up in the second. He thinks they're coming up, Ant.
I wouldn't be surprised either. I think if the right player presents itself, the 49ers will move up, use their draft capital to go out and get an impact player because they know they're a couple players away from being able to potentially get over the hump of the NFC and get into the Super Bowl. So I think they would strike in that type of situation. Also, we don't know what other players they plan on moving in the draft as well to get even more draft capital. So this is going to be fun. And yeah, maybe the number 14 Ray McLeod jersey make an appearance.
Maybe it can, Ant. Maybe it can. Cutback crew. We'll catch you on the next stream. We'll catch you on the next episode. And until that time, stay safe.
Remember, the right way
is always the 49ers way.